One of the things I would stress about this is the disconnect between what industry oftentimes observes on the water and what the stock assessment said. The beauty of close kin is that the onus is on the industry, and this is how you do it. You send in the samples.
It's giving us a voice. It's giving the fishermen and the fishing communities a voice. This is the KDC Sawyer Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Viking Yachts. Viking is a family-owned American boat builder committed to building a better boat every day. Viking builds sport fishing yachts from 50 to 90 feet and Valhalla center consoles from 28 to 55 feet. Viking sport fishing boats are recognized around the world for tournament success and for their quality and performance, with the company running 1 to 2 demo boats each year to compete and showcase their product. Beyond building boats and fishing, Viking supports the conservation of our oceans and fisheries while working to ensure the public has reasonable access to the marine resources. Family members and staff serve on the board of the Billfish Foundation, the Advisory Committee of the International Commission and Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, the Highly Migratory Species Advisory Panel, and the Hudson Canyon Marine Sanctuary Advisory Committee, as well as seats on industry association boards, including the National Marine Manufacturers Association and the American Sport Fishing Association. For more information, visit vikingyachts.com and valhallaboatworks.com. Follow at Viking Yachts and at Valhalla Boatworks on Instagram. Follow the Viking Demo team at viking.demo and sign up for e-blast and newsletters on both websites. Welcome to the KDC Sawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today I'm sitting down with a new friend of mine that I'm pretty excited about. He's from the University of Maine, leading the Pelagic Fisheries Lab, Dr. Walt Golet. Walt, thank you so much for sitting with us.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for the introduction. And I would say more so, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. This is wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you again.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
And you can call me Walt. You can call me Walt. No
okay,
doctor.
Perfect.
No doctor.
I mean, I love throwing the doctor around. I think that it's always super impressive. There was a time in my life I wanted to be Dr. Blue Marlin, but then I finished my master's degree and I told my husband, don't ever let me go back to school. So
well, they call the PhD just piled higher and deeper. So
yes, accurate. So today, I think it's really cool, especially the fact that you're tuning in right now as we're recording this. You're tuning in from the Mid-Atlantic tournament. That's awesome. Correct. We really want to dive into that a little bit later. But before we get too deep into this conversation, I want to preface it with an introduction to our listeners. You guys, we are here to talk about the Close Kin Mark-Recapture bluefin initiative that Walt and Viking Yachts are pushing to get a better assessment of the bluefin tuna stock populations in the Atlantic. Now, the bluefin tuna, the Atlantic bluefin tuna, have been highly regulated for a while now, and it's been absolutely amazing because we've seen an incredible bounce back in the stock, which we all love. However, we're finding ourselves in a situation that could be perceived almost as a double-edged sword, where we are at risk of finding ourselves in a regulatory spiral because we don't have accurate stock assessments of the bluefin tuna. And that means that we're catching more fish, which means more overages, which means risk of higher regulation. So Walt and I are going to discuss how we as fishermen and our communities can help get better regulations and create more accessibility for the bluefin tuna fishing and the longevity of the fisheries and our communities that depend on them, which is what I'm all about. So
absolutely.
Walt, do you have any edits on what I just said before we dive into the conversation?
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah,
she nailed it. Good.
We're always we're always looking for ways to improve our assessments. And for our scientists that do the stock assessments now, it's like being asked to create a meal or a dessert. And if you don't have all the proper ingredients, the product on the other end may or may not resemble what you want it to. And it's a very simple analogy, but fishery stock assessments, first of all, they're very complicated. But second, the person that does the assessment can only do so much with what they have. So if they don't have all of the necessary pieces of information, or again, to put it in that sort of simple baking analogy, if they don't have all those ingredients, what comes out on the other side may or may not reflect exactly what it is that you originally sought to do. And in the case of fisheries, it may or may not actually represent what the abundance or the status, I guess I would say, of the population is doing. So no, you were correct in exactly what you said.
Well, I'm really glad that I have a basic understanding, because it's been like, okay, wait, hold on. So help me understand the issue. I have done a couple podcasts with Chloe Michaels, who's amazing.
Yeah.
We've talked about bluefin science. I've tagged with Tag a Giant over in the Canary Islands. That was amazing. And I know a little bit about what's going on,
Sure.
but this closed kin Mark-Recapture technology is relatively new, right?
It is. It has been applied for some other species. I guess the one that's most notable and closest to what we are doing would be for southern bluefin tuna. So
that's in the Pacific. Southern Pacific.
Is. Yep,
okay.
The southern. Yep, exactly. And it's been applied there successfully. And not only has it been applied, but it's been fully integrated, at least to the best of my knowledge now, for several years. So it's new, or maybe novel to the Atlantic bluefin, but it has been used in other systems before, in other marine systems, and it's been used successfully. So again, we're always, whether you're a fisheries scientist or a fisheries stock assessment scientist, or you're a fishery manager, I think, and I would include the industry in that category as well. We're all trying to find the best methods to evaluate the status of stocks or populations. And I love this quote, because when you go into the ocean and you're trying to figure out how many fish there are, it's very different than something on land. And this is not to diminish, by the way, say a forester's job, or someone who is assessing the status of maybe moose, where your tools,
which is extremely challenging.
It is challenging. It is challenging for sure. But for example, if I was to ask somebody to, what's the composition of this 1,000-acre parcel of woods, let me know what the species composition is of the trees and how big they are and so forth. You could do that with pretty good accuracy. You could go out there, you could timber cruise it and so forth. And then similarly for terrestrial animals, there are methods that I would say are probably have more certainty than in the marine realm. But the quote that I always like to come back to is, counting fish is like counting trees, except they're invisible, they move around, and they eat each other. So that's basically what you're dealing with. You are asking, I mean, think about it. The Atlantic Ocean is the second largest ocean in the world. Okay. Right. And we have a fish, a bluefin, which is considered a highly migratory animal. And by definition, what does that mean? It basically means that these animals can move freely until they get to their physiological extremes, either very intense depth, very high or very low temperature. But by all accounts, these animals can move all over the ocean, in the horizontal realm and in the vertical realm. And when you have an animal that can go from the Bay of Biscay to Cape Cod in, say, 30 or 40 days, it makes management really challenging, because when you're trying to, quote, count the fish, it's a really, really tough task. And I would say one of the biggest differences between a traditional stock assessment and what Close Kin can give us once it becomes operationalized is a physical number. So now when the stock assessment community provides us with an update on what the status of the Western Atlantic bluefin stock is, it's generally shared in what we call a biomass estimate, or a spawning stock biomass estimate. So it's really given to us in a weight. It's a weight of spawning capable fish. Close Kin actually moves the needle, and it allows us, again, once it's operationalized and been up and running for several years, the idea is that it can actually give us a number. So it's not a weight anymore. It becomes, how many individuals do you have above a certain size class? And the uncertainty that surrounds your estimate is also reduced. And so not only do you get a different type of abundance estimate, the accuracy of the abundance estimate that you get is believed also to be more accurate and has less uncertainty to it. So it's a really, really exciting method. And when this was applied for southern bluefin tuna, in the first few years, they found that their biomass estimates through Close Kin was much higher than the standard assessments. And that was kind of an eye opener, because it was like, whoa.
We have more fish than we thought we had.
Yeah, now this method is telling us that we have more fish than we originally thought we did. And so again, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing, because it has a trickle down effect. It starts with the assessment and management community, and then it goes out to all the various countries who have quota allocations, and then it goes to all the businesses that supply those fishing groups, the boat builders, the fuel, the tackle, the dockage, all of that, right? It's a huge trickle down effect. And even small increases can have a big benefit to coastal communities, depending on where these fish are distributed throughout the year.
There's no doubt.
It's a big thing. It's a really, really big thing.
And you touched on different countries, right? Now, the Atlantic bluefin tuna, I feel like, just has so many stakeholders involved in the success and the populations. And you said, they travel, they cross ocean basins, right? And they can do it in very little time, which is just insane. And in the realm of highly migratory species, I could tentatively argue that bluefin tuna is of the highest migration in the highest of migratory species. One of them for sure.
Yeah,
especially in fisheries, right? Because if we're taking sharks and whales out of the equation, are sharks and whales in highly migratory species?
So they are, but ICAT, International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. So I'll back up just a little bit. So there are 5 what we call regional fishery management organizations. ICAT, or what I just described, is one of them. The convention area for ICAT is the Atlantic and its adjacent water bodies and sea, so Mediterranean Sea and so forth. And we do have some pelagic sharks that we directly manage. Shortfin mako is a great example. Okay, so ICAT does manage shortfin mako. There's currently a prohibition on take of shortfin makos. We manage blue sharks. And so they do directly manage some of them. And then others, it's more of a bycatch issue. Whales, marine mammals, that would be a bycatch issue. Marine birds, a bycatch issue. So we don't manage them through ICAT per se, but we do address potential issues, interactions, for example, with maybe high seas fisheries or something of that nature when it comes to marine mammals, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. And the bluefin, it goes everywhere. It essentially goes just about everywhere in the Atlantic.
Yeah, it does. We don't believe there's a lot of crossover between the North and South Atlantic basins across the equator, but there are some. Interestingly, there are some conventional tag data sets that have suggested fish tagged in the North Atlantic have gone as far south as, say, Argentina. The tagging data, as far as I'm aware, the bulk of it is in the North Atlantic. And when I say North Atlantic, let's just, for the sake of argument, say the equator north, so 0 degrees and further north. But this is an animal, Brian McKenzie's published some papers that they're seeing bluefin in mackerel trawls off of Greenland. We know that the Japanese fleet has fished for bluefin off of Iceland. Norway has an amazing abundance of bluefin. They're back. Norway was the largest harvester of Atlantic bluefin back in the 60s. And then that biomass began to decline, and that fishery more or less went away. But now it's, bluefins are back in Norway, and they have successful fishing operations and tagging programs. And so they really do go everywhere in the North Atlantic. And on top of what I would call the horizontal range of the animal, they can also swim down to pretty amazing depths, exceeding a mile from the surface. And they can do it very rapidly. And because Chloe probably touched on this, but because they have that specialized physiology where they have these countercurrent heat exchangers and they can retain metabolically generated heat, for them to go down into water that's 35 or 36 degrees, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
They can just do it. So it is a pretty amazing animal in terms of where it can travel.
It really is.
Pretty spectacular.
It's really, really, really cool. But along with the grounds of the Atlantic bluefin tuna being so freaking cool and incredible, it's also that much harder to manage and take stock assessments of.
Yeah.
There are different populations of Atlantic bluefin tuna, correct? Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the Med and the Gulf populations and what we know?
Sure. So let's go all the way back in. Well, we won't go all the way back in history, but we'll go back as far as I can sort of go back in ICAT history. Originally, Atlantic bluefin were considered to be what we call panmictic stock. So across the Atlantic basin, the North Atlantic, we had just one stock. It really didn't matter if you were in the Eastern Atlantic or the Western Atlantic. Then fast forward a little bit to the 1970s, early 1980s, scientists started to look and discover that we did have what was presumed to be spawning site fidelity. So certain fish were going to particular spawning grounds. And then as science and technology evolved, that information started to become confirmed on a larger scale. And we saw that, yes, if you were spawning in the Gulf of Mexico, those were repeat spawners. Those animals kept going back. Same thing in the Mediterranean. Those animals kept going back. And then the idea was, well, we have small fish on one side and we have small fish on the other side. We have spawning ground here. We have a spawning ground here. And so there's some mixing, but the early idea was that the mixing wasn't as extensive. So you did have some fish that crossed the boundary, but maybe at this stage, we don't feel as though the mixing is substantial enough to impact the mortality of one stock against the other. So the west versus the east or vice versa. And so they divided the bluefin population into two stocks. And I believe 1982 was the first year that we had our quota allocations, and they sort of set up the line down the middle of the ocean where we did have an eastern stock and a western stock. There are big differences between those two stocks. The Eastern Atlantic stock, I think the biggest one is that the Eastern Atlantic stock is an order of magnitude larger than the Western stock is estimated to be. So 10 times. So the Eastern Atlantic population is considered to be 10 times bigger than the Western Atlantic population.
That's what that means. Okay, so 10 times bigger.
An order of magnitude is 10 times. So It's huge. Yeah, it's massive population in the Eastern Atlantic compared to the West. We could go down a whole rabbit hole of why that is, but probably not worth it.
Yeah. I mean, especially as you know, I think I just mentioned it. I was working in the Canary Islands. I got to fish in Spain and be a part of that community and that fishery. And I spent some time in the Med, and it's just it just feels like they overfish like crazy over there. So it's and you mentioned Norway a little while ago. So it's very interesting, but yeah, we'll just plant that seed and please continue.
Yeah. And so we had this idea that we would manage the two stocks separately with the idea that there's no mixing between them. But then, of course, and you've mentioned, the Tag a Giant Foundation, Molly Lutcavage has done a lot of tagging. Our lab has done a lot of tagging. The Eastern Atlantic scientists have done a lot of tagging. And what we found out of that is the picture is much more complex than we obviously originally thought. And so the mixing is actually quite extensive, very extensive, actually. And you can see the mixing through the tagging data. You can see the mixing through the otolith chemistry data, and through, in some cases, through things like genetics data, and so forth. So now we know that the stocks mix freely. It seems as though the mixing is biased from the east to the west. And so what I like to tell everybody in the West is we are heavily subsidized, at least right now, we are heavily subsidized by the Eastern Atlantic stock. In other words, most of the fish that we catch on this side, and that's across almost all of the size classes, except for the very large ones, the majority of those fish have an Eastern signature to them.
Now, I want to take a moment and just clarify. When you say most of the fish we catch on this side, you're specifying the eastern coast of the U.S., right? Not the Gulf of Mexico.
No, exactly. Yes, okay. Exactly. So let me go back to a couple of points on this. The first thing I'll go back to is the stocks. And as I mentioned, there's considered to be two of them, but I think a lot of the scientists that are in the bluefin world agree that the complexities in the stock dynamics are much greater than we anticipate. For example, the Slope Sea, we know, is a confirmed spawning area. What does that contribute to the population? Which fish are spawning there? Are they, quote, Western fish that are spawning there? Are they Eastern fish that are spawning there? Are they a new fish? So as of right now, we have two stocks. I think most of the scientific community would agree that the complexities in stock dynamics are much greater. And there are probably more than two stocks. We're just not to the point where we can
confidently
consider
say it
and manage
mm-hmm.
based
Mm-hmm.
on that. So
Absolutely.
again, just to kind of get back to that point, just a little bit. And when we're talking about the Western fishery being heavily subsidized, exactly what I'm saying is, if you are looking at the angling category, which is our recreational category, which for the most part is North Carolina to Maine. And then if you're looking at the commercial fishery, again, for the most part, which is North Carolina to Maine, those fish have a high representation of Eastern origin fish in them. The trend, and this trend is work done by my close colleague, Lisa Kerr at UMaine. She does a lot of stock structure work. The trend is that the contribution of Eastern fish in Western fisheries is highest for the smallest size classes, and then it gradually declines as you fish on the larger and larger individuals. That's not to say that the really big fish are all Western. That's not how it shakes out anymore. It used to. Dave Secor and Jay Rooker did a lot of this pioneering stock structure work with otolith chemistry, and they look back at the historical archive. Almost all of our fish were Western origin, but in the 1990s, we started to see more mixing, and now we see the mixing is rather extensive. And again, based on the estimates that we have from otolith chemistry, somewhere between 50 and 70% of the fish that we harvest on an annual basis across the angling and giant categories, so our recreational and commercial categories, they have an Eastern origin signature.
That's insane.
And
that is such a high percentage.
Yeah, it's huge. So like I tell people, 5 out of every 10 or sometimes 7 out of every 10 fish that you're landing actually were spawned. A lot of people say born. They're not really, I always say spawned. They're spawned in the Eastern Atlantic Ocean.
Their mamas were in the Med.
Yep, exactly. So what's fascinating about that is, let's say that you're off of Wanchese in the wintertime and you're catching fish there, or you're up in Maine and you're catching fish on one of the local, humps up where we are. It's amazing to think that the fish that you caught as a larva may have been spawned off of Italy or somewhere off of Spain, or even further in the Eastern Mediterranean, closer to, Turkey. So
seriously
it's
wild.
Pretty amazing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing that they travel. And as I said, the older / longer, because those two variables are correlated for the most part, the older / longer the fish get, the lower the contribution of Eastern origin fish seems to be. It's not exclusive anymore.
That's
but
so interesting.
Yeah, there's both data for the otolith chemistry, and I think to some degree for some of the tagging that indicates once the fish reach a certain size, a higher percentage of them stay in the Eastern Atlantic. They don't seem to travel back across. That's not exclusive, by the way, because myself and others have big fish. You would, I know, but they definitely travel here at a very young age. 35-inch fish. There's the National Marine Fisheries Service. So Frank Mather was the inventor, if you will, of the cooperative game fish tagging program, which is still in existence today through NOAA. And that was the conventional; those were the streamer tags. He was the one that developed that. And I believe that database shows fish as small as 35, 36 inches have Eastern origin streamer tags in them, 40 inches, and they're caught in Cape Cod Bay. Or
I can't help but think that's adorable. Those those are the words that are in my mind right now. That's incredible. I'm blown away. I had no idea.
And to get back, I guess, to your original point, that's what creates such logistical challenges for how to manage them, because you have you're fishing on a mixed stock. And the fish are freely moving. They're running back and forth across the Atlantic. They do that, pretty much throughout their lifetime. And not only that, but even within a week or a few days, again, this is an animal with a really big and a really powerful tail. And so in a couple of days, it's not a big deal for them to swim a couple 100 miles. And even in the Gulf of Maine, where we are, the fish could be down by Portland, Maine, and the next day they could be in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And what does that do? Well, that puts that fish across an international boundary. So it's no longer in a U.S. fishery, it's now in a Canadian fishery. So there's a lot of complexities here, and the dynamics are just amazing. And also really hard to keep track of.
Yeah, and hard to keep track of. And that kind of brings me to my next question for you. What we know up until recently about these populations has been gathered from 1, satellite tags, and 2, genetic markers that we've gathered from harvested fish, right? Like most of the data you have, that your lab has, and that studies have been done on before, are from fish that have actually been brought back to the dock.
So I guess what I would do is I would divide this into 2 components in terms of what we get for data for bluefin, which is sort of ubiquitous for a lot of fisheries. We have our fishery dependent data. So, and I can break that down even further. Within that, we have what I call the biology or the life history. So these are things like, what's the age structure? How many big fish do we have? How many small fish do we have? That's an important thing to understand. A good friend of mine who was a spotter pilot for the purse seine fishery for a long time off New England and in many other places used to always say, I am not concerned about what I'm catching now. My thoughts are always with what I'll be catching in the future. And so he would always look to see what the abundance or what this age structure was of the small fish, because he knew that that was his recruitment class for what was going to be coming in the next 5 to 10 years. So age structure is a really important thing to understand. What's the proportion of individuals in those different age groups? And do you see those smaller fish? If you don't see those smaller fish, one of the problems is that the models that do the assessment see that as a red flag, because they're looking to see what's going to be upcoming for recruitment in future years. So age structure is an important thing. Longevity, how long do the fish live? Stock structure, I mentioned to you before. What's the percentage of fish that are Western origin and Eastern origin? There's a lot of work that's done on their migration, as you pointed to, the electronic tagging. So what percentage of time are the fish spending in different fishing areas? Natural mortality is a very important thing to estimate. Fishing mortality in various kinds. We also have what we call indices, so catch indices. So, the National Marine Fisheries Service through NOAA will conduct surveys to understand what our quote catch rates are. So how fast are we catching these animals? And then we have some of the fishery independent data that we get is also with tagging. So pop-up satellite tags, which I think you mentioned before, you were part of putting some of those out. Those are what we call fishery independent, because we don't need a boat to capture them. The tag does its own thing. We also have, larval surveys that are conducted in the Gulf of Mexico and now in the Slope Sea, because we have some support to do that. And then, again, there's additional indices or information that we get from fishery interviews, dockside interviews. Where were you? What did you catch? How many did you catch? Those types of things. So it's a pretty complex group of data that goes into the assessment.
And each one of those has their own complexities.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Some of them an extremely long list of complexities.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Just for any of them, you could identify sources of error. Now, we go to great lengths. When I say we, the scientific community goes to great lengths to minimize that, but it's never zero. There's always the chance that there is an error in there. But the idea behind it is that we minimize it to the point where it probably doesn't have that big of an effect.
Pretty incredible.
So we try to eliminate it as much as possible. But there is a lot of people that collect a lot of data on these animals. And I guess one of the things that I would say I'm the most proud about our lab is the information that we collect is on a direct pipeline to ICAT through NOAA. So, for example, every year our lab goes out and we collect somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 giants from the commercial fishery. We age them. Again, with Lisa Kerr, we do the stock structure work. We do a lot of tagging as well. And what's nice is I can say that once we do that, then we send that data off and it's used in the assessment. So that's kind of a rewarding aspect of this.
Very.
There's certainly something to be said about gaining knowledge for the sake of gaining knowledge, right? Maybe, just general ecology. But what I find the most rewarding is that the industry goes to great lengths for us to keep heads, not, it's a little bit different when you catch a 35-inch fish or a 40-inch fish. The head is maybe this big, but the guys in North Carolina and up in the Northeast, when they're catching fish that are 118, 120 inches long, the head weighs 110 pounds.
Yeah.
And so they save it. They save it for us. They bring it back, and we're able to collect that. And I think for our part, we like the fact that, look, you went and you put yourself out there. You saved this head for this massive, gnarly, stinky head for us. And then we're able to get the information that we want from it and then send it back in. And that's where I think it makes a nice cycle, because we work very closely with the industry and we give back everything that we extract from those fish for the sole purpose to make sure that we have the best information available for the fishery and, long-term conservation.
I love it.
The reason we're here, I always tell everybody, the reason we're here and the reason I have a research lab is because we have fishermen. That's why. We have an extracted resource. It doesn't matter if it's on land. It doesn't matter if it's in the water. If you're extracting something, you need to know what the rate of extraction is. And you're basically, in the simplest terms, you're balancing mortality and recruitment or births, those types of things. And so the reason we're here is because we have a fishery. And so we want, obviously, the long-term conservation of the stock is a priority, but at the same time, we want to provide angling opportunities. There is nothing like catching a giant. Well, yeah, no, there's nothing.
No, there's nothing like it. There's really not. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that one.
Blue marlins are fun to catch. They're fun when they tail walk and do things like that. And short fin makos jump pretty incredibly, but giants just have a amazing body plan, and they just pull like nothing else.
Like nothing else.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so fun. See, now you distracted me. I was going to ask, I was going to say something, and then you're like, there's nothing like catching a giant bluefin tuna. And I'm like, no,
we took a right-hand turn.
I love it. Okay. Oh my gosh, you were on a roll. I was like coming in hot with my next comment. Okay. Yes, no, I completely agree with you. And that's amazing. And you really derailed me, Walt.
I'm sorry, that wasn't the intention.
It's okay. No, it's okay. You did so good. So, on that note, we have, first off, okay, you said that you wouldn't be here, your lab wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fishermen. And I think it's an extremely, I think that's a graceful thing to say. And I also think I should showcase that it's a symbiotic relationship. Like our fisheries wouldn't be here if it weren't for the scientists that were taking the stock assessments, that were taking the sampling, that were making sure that our fisheries stay healthy for the long term. So I think that that's really cool. And it really just showcases the importance of continued collaboration and partnership, and the fact that now we're moving into something, because we were talking about this the other day and I was kind of just blown away by this initiative that's being pushed by Viking and you guys. It's so incredible. I think it's so cool, because I didn't quite realize that we could actually be taking quality data from fish without killing them.
Exactly.
I was sitting here thinking that the only thing you could do with a live bluefin is, for example, just narrowing it down, with a live bluefin is putting an extremely expensive satellite tag on it and then, sending it off its merry way into the great blue ocean and hoping that it, everything's fine. So yeah, no, that's a stressful thing in itself. But now we can actually just get a fin clip and get some information from that. Tell us a little bit, actually just dive into it. Dive into what a fin clip, first off, the process of the fin clip and why it's important and what you can get from it.
Sure. So again, originally you hit it right on the money. When we've been collecting data, tissue samples from the fisheries, angling, recreational, and the commercial fisheries, it's a dead fish. We get a head, or we get the stomach or the liver, but we get the parts of the fish, which you can't get. You can't release a bluefin without its otoliths. You can, but it's not going to do well.
No.
So that's really been the history. And that collaboration has been, I would say, wildly successful because of the commitments of the fishermen and the commercial dealers. So we're over 17,000 bluefin that we've sampled over the last decade or so. So we have an amazing archive. However, to put that into context, it's only a fraction of the fish that are probably caught and released. And so we've always been thinking about, well, how do we access that part of the fishery?
I mean, especially now that we the bluefin quota just closed for the year.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
last
exactly.
Week.
And so how do we get information from the animal when it's put back in the water? And so several years ago, in partnership with the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans, NOAA, ourselves, and many others, we came up with the idea of this Close Kin project. And we can talk about the details of the Close Kin a little bit later, but what I'll say to get to your point about what can you get from a released fish, that project then sparked several things. So when you take a finlet clip of the tuna, we can get a genetic fingerprint of that animal. So you and I have very distinct genetic fingerprints, right? If someone was to take a piece of your DNA and a piece of my DNA, they could easily tell us apart. That's easy to do. So from that finlet, we can get what we call a tag, a genetic tag. So in a traditional sense, if you caught a fish and you tagged it with a streamer tag, it would have a number, 0012563.
Streamer tag's the same thing as a spaghetti tag?
Spaghetti tag or a conventional tag, yeah, all exactly. Just different people have different names for them, exactly. But just the piece of nylon, yes, exactly. Just the piece of nylon with a little unique identifier on it. And so you would release that fish, and that's also a tag. That's also a tag. That comes with a lot of problems. The tags can shed, right? Just like you and I, something stuck in you, your body will have a reaction and it may get rid of it. So the tags can be shed. The tag may not be reported. Someone may catch it and be like, I don't have time for this. Right? So there's a lot of issues with getting information from a fish that's tagged with a conventional or spaghetti tag. But when we take the genetic tag from it, that never goes away. So when you release that fish, if it is recaptured again and resampled, or as it grows, if it's then recaptured in a commercial fishery somewhere, we're always going to know. We are always going to have the fingerprint of that fish. So right now I'm in Jersey, as I mentioned, at the Mid-Atlantic Tournament. There has historically been a pretty robust small fish fishery off of Jersey. And let's say you caught a fish here that was 30 or 35 inches long, and you took a finlet and you sent it into us, and we had it sequenced. We would get that DNA fingerprint of that fish. 15 years later, if someone catches that fish in Malta or Cyprus, or any number of countries around the world, we will know that it matches as long as we get that second sample. And so that's one powerful thing about it is, unlike spaghetti tags, the tag is there for life. You can't change your DNA. It's physically impossible, and you can't lose it. So that's number one. Another thing that came through this Close Kin project and the genetics aspect of it is the markers to identify sex of the fish. So whether it's a male or whether it's a female, it is crazy because
I have to tell the listeners, you guys, that's insane because in the past, it's always been to identify the sex of a fish, you have to look at the gonads. And to do that, you have to cut the fish open. So it's dead, we're done here.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Continue, please.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. That was a huge advancement. So now we can, as you mentioned, bluefin are a species that do not have or lack external characteristics that differentiate them by sex. So you can't tell a male versus a female. With the genetics now, we are able to identify this is a male, this is a female. So all of the fish that are released, again, if we have the funds and support to do it, we can figure out what they are, males versus females. It leads to some interesting observations. I'll give you one, and then I'll move on, so I don't go down the rabbit hole too much. I'm
excited.
But in the Gulf of Maine area, or what I would call the Northwest Atlantic, some of the early Canadian scientists, through kill observations, so fish come to the dock and they examine them, just like you said, looking at their gonads, they noticed a bias in the sex ratio. It was always dominated by males, and that was in the 1970s. We picked up that work in the 2000s and then the 2010s, and we continue it to this day. So, for example, at our tournaments, we'll always check the sex of the fish. And now through genetics, we're able to do it on a much larger basis. And we still see a bias in the sex ratios. There's a skewing towards males. Sometimes it's as high as 4-1, males to females. Yeah, it's crazy. And when you go to the spawning grounds,
big fish too, right?
Yeah, big fish. Yeah, these are big fish. So it's a preponderance of males in the Northwest Atlantic. We don't know why.
I love that.
We don't know why. I mean, the running joke that is that the males are dumb enough to bite the hooks and the females know better, type of a thing, right? I don't know if that's really the case. I don't think female tunas are that much smarter than the males, but that's the joke. That's the running joke.
Maybe their eyesight's just that much better.
Yeah, exactly. The males are dumber and they grab the hooks. But what's really cool is that, that's, in the 1970s, you're talking almost 50 years ago, or right around 50 years ago now. And that trend still holds. So there's something to be said about the fact that we have more males in the fishery, at least up here on the foraging grounds. And truthfully, again, not to go into too much detail, that can have a big impact on your mortality levels too, because killing more males oftentimes is a good thing, because the females are the ones that are reproducing, and you can have one male tuna that can potentially spawn with multiple females, but it doesn't go the other way, right? That sort of holds for all animals that have sexual reproduction. Right. And so the females we're just going to be honest about this, the females hold more value in terms of that. Mm-hmm. So that's a really important thing that we're able to now advance upon with genetics. I mentioned aging before. How do you age a tuna? Well, you have to take the otoliths out. I mean, people have done aging on lots of tissues. They've tried to use scales. They've tried to use vertebrae. They've tried to use what we call the spiniform ray. So on a bluefin, they can fully retract their first dorsal fin. So if you pull that dorsal fin out and you take that first spine out, you can actually age that spine. But there's all sorts of complications and nuances there. And then you can use otoliths. But for the most part, to do that requires
real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Otoliths, you guys, are the ear bones of the fish. Yes. So they're deep in their head, essentially behind the gill plate.
So if you were to look at a tuna from the side view, and I always tell everybody, otoliths are located about a palm's width behind the eye. That's about where they are. Mm-hmm. They're at the back of the skull. Yep, they're in the back of the skull. And they have various functions. The largest functions are helping the fish understand its orientation and sense acceleration. So we have a very similar structure in our inner ear, not identical, but we have a very similar structure. It's the same reason why you can tell you're moving, if you're in an elevator and it's dark or something. The same reason why
I'm always car sick.
Yeah, well, yeah, multiple reasons there, but
especially
yes, that's part of it.
Driving.
That's part of it.
Just kidding.
But teleost fish or bony fish have 3 sets of otoliths, and they have 3 on each side, and they all have a little bit different function. But suffice to say, that's the main function, and in some fish, it's also for sound perception and things like that. But the cool part about the otoliths is they grow just like a tree trunk would, and so they accrete material every single day. They're accreting or acquiring material. And that material is laid down at different rates, summer versus winter. And the density of what we call the accretion creates differences in contrast. So when you take the otolith and you section it and you put it under a microscope and you shine light through it, you're going to see alternating bands. Some will be lighter and some will be darker. And you just count one of those bands. And just as you would to count the rings on the stump of a tree, you age the fish. And historically, that was the way we did it. We would have to kill the fish, take the otoliths out, and age it. Now we have techniques called epigenetic aging or age methylation, where we can look at the DNA, the degradation, if you will, of the DNA, and use it as a proxy for age. So as you and I are talking, and we discussed this a little bit before, but as you and I are talking, tick tock, right?
Yeah, my DNA is degrading.
The clock is ticking, and that's just part of life. Well, the same thing happens with fish. Now, granted, you have to be very careful because what we call the DNA clocks are different based on different tissue types, but you can standardize that. But the cool part is, out of that little finlet, it seems as though now we can get age of the fish as well. So again, to bring it back to your initial point, you don't have to kill every fish, presumably, to get the age information out of it. And then another neat part of it is it appears, although it's still ongoing, but it appears as though the genetic markers are there to differentiate eastern and western stocks based on DNA. And so that's a little bit different than otolith chemistry. And this is an important distinction. Genetics are telling you more of a population difference, genetic population difference, whereas otoliths are telling you where the fish was located. And I'll go into detail a little bit on that. So every time a fish is spawned, it is acquiring environmental information through the gills, because not only oxygen, but other things are transferred through the gills. They go into the blood, and then they go into the otoliths. Likewise, when a fish eats something, the chemistry, the water chemistry is in the gut. It gets absorbed into the blood, and it goes into the otolith. So an otolith is telling you what the environmental chemistry is where the fish is spawned. The DNA is telling you a genetic structure from a population. So it's a little bit different. There's a little bit of a nuance there. And the best example I can give you is the Mediterranean Sea and the other spawning ground, the Gulf of Mexico, is different in terms of its chemistry, its water chemistry. However, we believe that small bluefin that leave the Mediterranean at a very young age and go into the Western and go into the Atlantic through the Straits of Gibraltar and go into the Atlantic, if they do that too soon, it's possible that even though it's an Eastern fish, it might take on a Western signature because, again, the differences in water chemistry are very, very specific to the Mediterranean proper, not the Eastern Atlantic. So I just wanted to make the point that those two methods do give us stock structure, but they give it to us in slightly different ways. One is an environmental signal, and the other is a genetic population relatedness. So from the genetic perspective, it's which population does it share its sort of ancestry with, I guess is what I would say.
So the genetic marker is more accurate, is what you're saying.
The classification for both of them is actually rather high. It's generally in the high 80s. Okay, so they're both pretty robust. And everything we do in science, we always love to do with multiple methods. And so this is a great example. You have some fish that are harvested, and you sample those fish, and you take their otoliths, and you get their stock structure, again, based on an environmental chemistry background. That's great. Then you can do the same thing because we get muscle sample from the fish, and we can do the stock structure work with the genetics. And what we really like to see and what we really like to do in fisheries is have duplicate methods that show the same trend. And that is huge. And so if the genetics and the otolith chemistry are showing you the same trends, the absolute numbers might not be the same. But as long as when the otoliths go up, the genetics is going up and they're following a similar pattern, that is ideal. That's really what you want. And so from that little piece of a finlet, and it can be like, we have information we can share with you on the project and what we take from it, but it's bigger than that.
So we'll definitely, you guys check the description below.
Yep.
I'll definitely attach all of that, but please continue.
We'll put all of that in there. But basically from a piece of finlet that's about the size of the head of a push pin tack, we can get all of that information.
I have to talk to you, Walt, about the finlet because you mentioned that finlet specifically the other day when we were on the phone. And I will tell you just real quick, a segue. Does it have to be the finlet, or can it be like a piece of the pec fin or the pelvic fins? Why the finlet?
We like to do the finlet is fairly easy to cut. The pec fin's more robust. It's a little bit harder to cut off.
Okay.
Excuse me. We also
cut a piece off, you guys, not the whole thing.
No, don't cut the whole thing off. No, the fish will be swimming to the left all the time.
Like Dory. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Nemo. Continue.
Nemo, yeah. And so the finlet is easy to extract. It's easy to cut. And on top of that, we always like to keep things consistent. Yes, you can probably use different tissues, but again, we standardize stuff as much as we possibly can.
Okay,
it's really
that makes
important to
sense.
standardize stuff.
Yeah.
We could use different tissues, right? Again, the DNA profile should be the DNA profile, but if you can, why not eliminate all potential conflicting variables? So we'll get rid of that, and we just do the finlet. Plus, the finlets are flexible and they fit in the vials really, really,
really nicely.
Yeah, they go in very well, and they preserve really, really well. There's not a lot of bone or harder tissue in there. It's a very soft tissue, and it fixes very quickly.
They're such a fascinating part of the fish.
Yeah, the pec fin is a little bit more robust, as most people know who have caught one, and so it takes a little bit more to fix them. The finlets are a little bit better, so we like to go with the finlets if possible. And we've already tested the finlets, and we know that it works. We know that the DNA extraction works, and everything is good, so we try to stay with that.
So the way to take, thank you for answering that. So the way to take the genetic markers off of a living fish, like you catch a bluefin tuna, woohoo, we have to release it because we're out of closure or it doesn't meet the size regulations. It's still extremely potentially valuable data for you guys and therefore for us. And so what you recommend is to cut a finlet off and then put in a vial.
Just the top. Doesn't even have to be a top, just the very top of it. It doesn't have to be a very big piece. It's a very, very tiny piece.
That's incredible. And so tell us a little bit about, tell us a little bit about what you and Viking are doing right now. Like, I know, go for it.
Sure. So the idea behind this, and we created a sort of a funny little name. The project's called Genetics for Giants and Juvies, and the idea behind it is that we're going to sample both the commercial and recreational categories. Viking has been an awesome supporter of this. They are really, really pushing this. They're in touch with us. They're doing a lot of social media stuff with us and outreach. And the idea here is that you can sign up. It's very easy. We have a simple Google form. We're not, an agency that's looking to get all your personal information. However, if you do want to participate in the program, we do need a mailing address.
Yeah.
And we need a way to contact you. So people can sign up. And again, I can send you all of the links and that you can put in the description.
It's going to be in the description, you guys.
Yep. You can put in the description.
Super
and
easy.
It's very easy. It's basically name, address, and some contact information. We ship everything to you for free. We also cover shipping on the way back.
That's crazy. Literally, you don't have to do anything except go fishing and cut a pin.
Just cut the fish. And then within the kit, the kits, we keep them small at first, but the kits have 15 vials. The fixative is not dangerous. It's not formaldehyde or anything like that. So if you were to spill it, it's no big deal. It's just a salt solution. Wipe it up. So we have 15 vials. In the kit, you also have everything else that you need. We have a little pair of scissors in there that you can clip the finlet off with, and instructions. Now, we do need some information from the industry. Please don't, when we say, what species is it? Hopefully it's a bluefin, but more importantly, we need things, if you can, like measurements. Obviously, if it's a really big fish and you can't bring it over the side, we get that. Give us an estimate, how long it is approximately, or how much did it weigh. Location is great. Again, I know sometimes fishing spots can be a little bit, secretive or what have you, and that's fine. We don't need to have the exact location, but we do have some people sometimes that have put Atlantic Ocean. That's not that's not as helpful. So if you could refine it just a little bit from Atlantic Ocean, that would be
100
super.
miles off the coast of Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, even if you said something like, "Oh, I caught it in the Hudson Canyon," or "I caught it in Tom's Canyon," or Baltimore, or wherever, that even works.
Huge.
That even works. We would love to have specific data, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you don't have to. So there's just a little bit of data to fill out.
You don't sell the data.
I do not
sell the data. Fisherman.
No. There's not a big demand there.
Yet.
So
not yet.
Not yet. And so we just collect that information, and then what we're trying to do on the back end of this is to build out an interface. This is going to take us some time, but what we would like to do is build out an interface on the back end and start to show this sort of tree, if you will, of relatedness between fish, so that, again, for example, if you're here off of Jersey and you catch a 35-inch bluefin and you release it, and then 6 or 7 years later it's caught on Jeffrey's Ledge up near Portland, Maine, you would have a way to know that the fish that you released off Jersey was caught 5 or 6 or 8 years later off of Maine. And so we're going to try to set that up so that people can have some feedback. Yeah.
So, okay, because I gotta say, like, there's that whole thing where you can, like, buy a star for your loved one or something. Yeah. But, like, this is way cooler. Like, go on a date or take your daughter fishing or something like that. Get some bluefin samples, send them in, and see what happens next. Like, this is so cool.
And that what you said before is really appropriate, in that every fish tells a story, and we never know what fish is going to give us that new piece of information. You just never know. Sure, the fish you catch and release, it may do something that bluefin have been doing for 50 years. That's okay. That is okay. That's valuable. Mm-hmm. Likewise, you might give us a sample and all of a sudden that, we find that fish was caught off Dakar, Africa or something. I don't know. And it provides some new piece of information, but every single fish tells a story. And what I emphasize to people is it doesn't matter if you're someone who goes and catches 1,000 bluefin a year, maybe you're a charter boat operator or head boat, or if you're the person that goes out 3 times and maybe catches 6. All of those samples are important because keep in mind, it's an additive effect. We have approximately 25 or 26,000 HMS permits that are issued from Maine to Texas. Granted, not all of those boats fish for bluefin, but even if a handful does, even let's say if 6,000 or 7,000 of those boats fishes for bluefin, and every boat was to give us 1 sample a year, that would be a game changer. That would be a game changer. So again, if you're the person that only goes out a couple of weekends a year, or maybe you only catch a few fish, save the samples. They're valuable. Or if you're the person that goes out a lot and you can get us, 100 or 200, likewise, it's extremely valuable. But we are part of this is an industry-driven project. It does not work unless the industry provides us with the data. And I guess one of the things I would stress about this, and one of the things that has always been let's just call it a point of discussion, is the disconnect between what industry oftentimes observes on the water and what the stock assessment says. And this is not a problem that's just for bluefin. You can look across multiple species for almost all of the 500 plus stock and stock complexes that the U.S. manages throughout its EEZ. It's more or less ubiquitous. There's often these disconnects. We see tons and tons of fish, and then the stock assessment says something else. The beauty of close kin is that the onus is on the industry to now say or show us that in fact this is going on and this is how you do it. You send in the samples.
It's giving us a voice. It's giving the fishermen and the fishing communities a voice to show the regulatory agencies that we do actually have higher stocks than they think, and therefore we can potentially catch and have higher quotas than we currently have. Correct?
It's possible. I'll address those in two different ways. The front part, absolutely, it's industry driven, and it is a way for the fleet to contribute. And in this capacity for close kin, the fleet is the one that is contributing. I mean, it is the weight bearing beam, if you will, for the whole project. Without it, it falls apart. It is totally on the industry to supply the samples. Once you do, now it's on me and everybody else to get them sequenced and to get the data in. Now that gets to the next part that you just described. Does this result in an increase estimate for the Western bluefin population? Possibly, yeah. If I was to share with you some of the preliminary results, that's the way it looks. That's the way it looks. Now, does that mean we're going to get an increase? Well, ICAT is very complicated, and we are one of over 50 countries that participates in ICAT. And ICAT is an organization that works on consensus, which means everybody has to agree on things. That's a whole nother lecture we could do. But suffice to say, we are at the first stage, and that is we completed the pilot project for close kin. Now we want to operationalize it. We already have the model runs and the predictions of what Close Kin might do. And again, without going into too much detail, it changes things.
Yeah.
I can tell you that it changes things considerably.
It gives us a voice.
It changes the outlook of the stock.
Right.
It changes the outlook of the stock in terms of the abundance estimates and potential allocations, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have to caution everybody is it's not a simple, we did it, now do it. It's we're doing it, we're working on it. Now we need to get it incorporated at the international community. We have to get buy-in from them too. And I know for some folks that's going to be really frustrating because they're going to say, well, what the heck? We're doing it. We're making this investment. These fish are off our shore. Why don't we just, can't we just force this through? And
you did mention how 50 to 70% of the population of fish that are harvested are from the eastern stock. Like those are countries that are not the United States, you guys.
Exactly.
By doing this, we're just giving the data. That's what we're doing, is we're giving the data to support a position that will hopefully get us a more competitive advantage.
And what I will say is, from the communication that I have, because I'm intimately involved in all of this, everybody on our end is buying into Close Kin. And that goes from the industry folks that we already have on board, to the scientists that are working on this, to the assessment community, to the managers who represent us at the annual meeting every year and represent us in what we call the SCRS, Standing Committee on Research and Statistics, and the panel meetings at ICAT. So I can assure you, people are very excited about Close Kin. We are very excited about Close Kin in the Western Atlantic and the possibilities that it holds. Again, I can't speak with you here and say that next year things are going to turn around. Could they? Maybe. Just the international negotiations are very complicated. But what I can tell you is everybody from the first level all the way to the upper levels are very excited about Close Kin, and they see the benefits of it. And it is a revolutionary way to assess or provide estimates of stock abundance. It is very, very different. It is very cool. Different. And it gets us, I think, without putting words into some of the assessment scientists' mouths, because I'm not a stock assessment scientist. I don't have the math chops to do it. And I'll freely admit that.
Oh my God, you and me both.
Or the coding ability to do it. But what I will say is that community has time and time again said that Close Kin narrows that uncertainty window. It really does provide estimates that we can have much higher confidence in with much less uncertainty. And that's really where you want to go, because oftentimes there's a precautionary approach that's applied to fisheries management, right? You get a number, and then around that number there's sort of this cloud of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And you really don't want to go on the upper end, because what if you're wrong? And then if you go on the lower end, yes, you're being conservative, but in that case, what do? You take away opportunity, right? You close the fishery early, potentially. You you lower the daily retention limits. You change the categories for which you can retain fish and things like that. So it's a very complicated
which can in
scenario.
turn it can affect the communities when you're looking at tournaments, where there's closure. Totally. There's less money put in categories for tuna potentially, which means there's less boats fishing potentially, which means there's less money coming into the communities potentially. Like there's a lot of lower tier trickle, like you said, trickle effects.
Well, I'd also emphasize, the owner operators, say that you have a charter boat and you run a business, and a big component of your business is catching angling size bluefin. Now, this is my personal opinion. People might disagree with me, but for example, if you have a charter boat license and you're taking 6 clients out, and you catch a 60-inch bluefin, that's a big bluefin. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you need 6 of them, one for everybody, because that's over 1,000 pounds of meat. But that's just my personal opinion. That's just my personal opinion. But what I will say is, for the charter boat captain, what is important a lot of times is having the ability for their clients to retain a fish. I think that is really important. Yes, catch and release is fun. I do it a lot. But you also have to understand that many of the charter boat captains do rely on the fact that their clients can keep a fish, even if it's a smaller one, even if it's a 40-inch fish. That's a lot of steaks for 6 people that are on the boat.
They're going fishing to feed their families sometimes.
Yeah, they go out. Yeah, it's like, let's have a treat. You guys want, let's have some bluefin. Again, there's no guarantee when you leave the dock you're going to catch one. However, if you do catch one, it's nice to think in the back of your head, hey, I just paid this, this person X number of dollars to go on this charter boat. And yeah, I had fun catching and releasing them, but bluefin tastes really good. Yeah. And so, we want to take one of those fish. So again, as you said, it has these really big trickle down effects, and it impacts individuals. We're not talking about big, tuna canning corporations here.
No,
that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about individual owner operators of boats. Yeah. Family businesses, things like that. Maybe someone who doesn't fish even all year. Maybe they just rely on the income from a diversified fishery. Trip. Yeah. Something like that. So yeah, it definitely has, really big, really, really big downstream effects. So,
and on that note, there's the whole, the charter clients that are tentatively falling more in love with the ocean from this fish, this experience, the ability to feed their families off of this fish, and they're going to keep coming back and that sort of thing. Like it creates a loyalty.
Yeah. Well, again, a lot of charter boats have a clientele that comes back every year. You treat the clients good. The clients have a good time. And, why do you go back? Well, I had a good time with this person. They treated me well. We caught some fish. It's not always about catching, putting 100 in the box. It's just not. That's possible. But oftentimes, you go out, you catch a few fish. Maybe you can save one of them. That's a great day. That's a fantastic day. You get away from the other stuff that you have to deal with in life.
Yeah.
And you can get on the ocean for a little bit.
That's why I got into fishing. I sold everything and ran away to Costa Rica. I was like, I'm out. Let's go. I'm on the ocean now. Let's chill. So real quick, you mentioned earlier, I want to touch on this real quick. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier getting measurements on the fish. And then you said if it's too heavy to bring on board, do what you can kind of thing. Now, we don't want you guys gaffing the fish. Yeah. Because, you gaff the fish, then it's probably not going to swim away healthy. Yeah. It might most likely die. So we don't want that.
No. And actually, I mean, nymphs, this is sort of a weird area, because there are rules in place about removing highly migratory species from the water. People do it, but there are some rules in place about it. So again, even if you bring the fish up alongside the boat and you get an estimate,
we have release rulers.
There's release rulers.
Use that.
The guys, when we do the tagging for the giants, the boats that we go with, those guys are pretty good at estimating weights of the fish. So we would love the actual measurement, but having fished before myself, I know that if all 8 rods go off, it's chaos. This person's going over and under that person, and these 2 rods are tangled, and you're trying to undo these, you're clipping this, you're retying that, and it's an absolute mess sometimes. Mm-hmm. So do what you can. Do what you can. If you got 8 fish on and you are only able to sample 1, I don't care. That's
even
fine.
Even something that's like estimate 40 to 60 inches. Like that still gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. Yep. So definitely you guys give as much information as you can, but for the health and longevity of the fish and you and your crew.
Yeah, and I would emphasize, as we do with all of our sampling programs, you work within the confines of the health of the fish and the safety of whoever's on board. We obviously are not so engaged in close kin that we want people jumping over the side of the boat or falling out of the boat or getting a hook in the hand or whatever. If it's, like I tell people, if it's not right, and we do this with tagging all the time, sometimes there's a little bit of frustration because, the fish gets away and we didn't tag it or whatever. I'm like, I don't care. Who cares? The fish swam away. Well, maybe we'll catch it again. Maybe somebody else will catch it again. It's not a big deal. Same thing here. If you get a sample, great. If you get the finlet clip, but then you can't give us, the fish breaks off or throws the hook or whatever, and you don't get the rest of that information, you got something. Just tell us. Just right there.
Better than nothing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just write in. Sorry, couldn't get the length or couldn't get this or something like that.
It was probably a female because she was so smart.
She wouldn't even have bit the hook in the first place. But
Oh, funny.
But the emphasis really is on the fact that we really need, especially the angling community. And when I say angling, that's in bluefin speak, that's our non-commercial boats. We have a really good network with the commercial boats and the commercial dealers. The dealers act as a funnel point, and they have been absolutely incredible giving us access and getting us samples. But the angling community, to no fault of their own, is spread out, right?
Yeah.
We have boats in Maine, we have boats in North Carolina, and Maryland, and Delaware, and Jersey. And so you have boats very spread out, and it's a lot harder for people to, for example, put a head in their freezer, and then on the back end for me to try to go get it.
Yeah.
We can't be driving 15, 20,000 miles every other week to pick up these heads. So the fact that people can now use a finlet for a lot of the sampling is huge, because the box is only like this big. It's a little jewelry box.
It's huge
it's a game changer.
Yeah.
But the angling category really, the folks that are the recreational fishing, those are the samples that we really, really, really need. And what I would also emphasize on that is, for southern bluefin tuna, they have it down, no pun intended, to a science that they are even able, if I'm remembering correctly, to create indices, juvenile bluefin, southern bluefin tuna indices from the Close Kin project, because they sample enough of them every year that they're able to get abundance estimates for smaller size classes.
Wow.
And so that's really huge. If we could do that in the US, that would be huge for us, because right now our indices for small fish don't come from that genetic technology. They come from other means, surveys and things like that, observers and so forth. And so if we could get enough people in the angling category to participate in this on an annual basis, there are even bigger benefits that we could reap from this small fish fishery. Yeah. And again, because it's so spread out oftentimes, and it's dynamic, it could be off New York, then it's off Rhode Island, then it's off of New Jersey, Maryland. We just like the fish, we can't keep up with it. So we just have to lean on the industry to help us out when they can. So
I have a thought. Okay, first off, and on top of that, you guys, as Walt touched on, the program's paying for the shipment back to his lab too. So there's there's no cost. There's also opportunity to donate if you're somebody that doesn't want to doesn't have access to bluefin fishing but wants to contribute. There is donation options, so please, thank you for considering it, and that's in the link as well below. But I do want to touch on something, and I'm curious what your thought is on this, because as we talked about, historically, much of our data that we have on bluefin tuna, Atlantic bluefin tuna, was collected from harvested fish, right? And then we have these fish have been highly regulated for a while, which means that there are closures, and the seasonal closures in which you can harvest the bluefin tuna is generally late summer. Sometimes earlier, sometimes a little later, but that means that there's up to half a year of the season that we just don't have information on these fish. And I think what if there's, I think there's a lot of what ifs in a 5 to 7 month period of the year that we just don't really know about. I'm curious if you have what your thoughts are on that.
No, we want as much comprehensive and robust sampling as possible. So I absolutely agree. Even though we are now in a closure for the angling category
for 2025.
For 2025, that potentially creates a deficit for us in the science community, because we may not have now access to those fish. What I can tell you from the commercial sampling, which again was initiated first because it's just logistically, it's just a little bit more structured, is we do see changes across the season in the size structure of the fish. We do see at times some changes in the stock structure of the fish. The east and west proportions of fish does change through the season. We see changes in the condition of the fish. We see changes in what they're eating and so forth. So we really advocate to get samples throughout the entirety of the year, because you don't know how things are changing later in the season. So, for example, I'll give you a very applicable example. I mentioned before that we have the slope C. So in 2016, Dave Richardson from NOAA published a paper that identified the slope C as a potential spawning region for bluefin.
Where is the slope C?
So the slope C, it's off the continental shelf, and it extends approximately from North Carolina, so the far outer bank, not outer banks, but off the shelf there, all the way up on the outside of Georgia's bank, and then just a little bit to the north of that, and then outside in the deep water, and then back down on the western side of the Gulf Stream, approximately. That's approximately where it is. Yeah, okay. That's approximately where it is. And to put the question that you just gave me into context, the timing of spawning in the slope C is different than it is in the traditional Western Atlantic spawning ground in the Gulf of Mexico. If you were only to sample, say, from May to June, or from the middle of August to November, and you were doing gonadal, gonad histology, things like that, you would miss the spawning window. Mm-hmm. And so it is very much important that we sample fish across an entire time span, mm-hmm. because there are things in life history that you might miss. Now, I'm not saying we're going to miss the small fish spawning by not doing
that.
There's a lot
thing.
of but there's a lot of nuances there, mm-hmm. again, that we could go into and talk forever about, because bluefin reproduction in the Western Atlantic is probably the most complicated and debated thing. But the point is that if you don't sample, you can miss something. You can absolutely miss something. And so we try to be as comprehensive or as robust as we can in our sampling. For our giant sampling, for example, we sample the winter fishery off North Carolina. We have some great folks down there, some of the buyers that are down there, some of the fish houses that are down there. We also have some great representatives that are sampling fish for us down there. Dewey Hemmelwright, for example, got us like 400 or 500 samples this year from the winter fishery. Did an awesome, just spectacular job. Yeah, did for free, as in, it's not like we pay him or anything like that. Yeah. He does it always for free because he's interested in the Close Kin project, and he sees the benefit to it.
And a lot of fishermen are. That's the thing. Yes. It's like so many of us, we're interested. We want to help. This is a really great, accessible way to help. Like, I'm so excited about the fact that this is something that's so accessible.
Yeah, it is accessible. And again, just to get to that point, when the commercial fishery, we start January 1. It goes January, February, maybe March. It depends. That fishery can close early. Then April, May, it's closed, so there is no sampling for the rod and reel and the harpoon categories. Pelagic longline can. But June 1 all the way through to the next January, February, March time period, whenever that fishery does close, we're sampling fish constantly, mm-hmm. in those larger categories. So we would mm-hmm. love to be able to do the same thing with the small fish to the extent possible. I realize that the boats aren't always going after small fish, and the small fish aren't always available. But if we can get some representation in those months, awesome.
It's huge.
It's fantastic. It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah, it would be
huge.
Do
we have to wait until we have all 15 vials filled before sending them in?
You don't have to. No, you don't have to. You can send them in earlier if you want. But the nice thing about it is the fixative usually keeps the samples pretty good. So what I tell people is if we send you a kit, and like now, like let's say we sent you a kit now and you were going to fish for the next couple of months. If you have 6 or 8 in there in the next few weeks, just keep filling them up. And then when you're filled, let us know. We'll ship them. We'll give you the information to ship them back. And then if you would like, we'll ship you a new kit.
Amazing.
Free of charge.
It's so cool. Okay. Let's get a little nerdier, because it hasn't been nerdy enough for me.
Perfect.
Just kidding. Tell me about Close Kin and how do I say this? Matching. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Tell me about Close Kin matching heritage lines. I don't know how to say this with fish. Mother baby.
We call it POPs. POP.
Okay.
POP stands for parent offspring pairs. So what you're looking for and what we've accomplished, which is really cool, is you collect the samples from the juveniles and the adults, and at the same time, NIMS is conducting larval cruises. So they're doing the larval cruises in the Gulf of Mexico.
What is that? Like, what does that even look like?
Oh, that's so very big ship. A lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of effort. And what they do is they try to tow in regions, I believe, I don't know for sure because I'm not on the cruises, but I believe what they do is they look for areas that have historically, like through tagging data or oceanographic predictions, are conducive for bluefin spawning. And so they go, I mean, think about how big the Gulf of Mexico is. It's massive,
huge.
Right? The thing is huge.
I've crossed it a couple times.
Yeah, it's massive.
It's big.
Yeah. And so when you have a net that's only a few meters wide, it's like a needle in a haystack. However, the cool part is they've been wildly successful at getting larvae in the Gulf of Mexico. And then this year, fortunately, we were able to get some support to do a larval cruise in the Slope Sea. And so that was conducted this year, which is huge. And I'm so excited. It was very successful. Again, Dave Richardson headed that up.
Exciting.
Yes, I know. Dave spearheaded that. He was the one that, he was the lead on that. And I was doing my dance and my jig and crossing my fingers and knocking on wood and throwing salt over my shoulder and all the things to make sure that his trip was going to be successful. Because when you're that far out at sea, you just never know. There's breakdowns, there's equipment failures.
You
there's
never
the fact
know.
That the fish are not going to be there. But he was, it looks like there was some success there. And on a larger scale, we have lots and lots of matches. So we have the larva.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Wow. No wow. Yeah. When you do the larval cruise and you get larvae, what does that, like, what do you do with it? Like, do they die? Like, what's the process?
Oh yeah, they're fixed. Yeah, they put them in fixative. Yeah, they'll be put into a fixative.
Like how many? Like what? Like help me understand, because what I'm thinking,
thousands.
So
we can get thousands at a time.
But I'm thinking, like, why would you want to take help me understand why you would want to take larvae out of the water instead of letting it grow to be a bigger fish and then right?
Sure. So right off the bat, if there is anything to reincarnation and you coming back as another animal, don't come back as a baby fish.
No.
99.9
turtle.
Yeah, 99. They got a better chance though. 99.99999 repeating percent of fish eggs will never survive.
That's wild. So
what you're fishing on is a minute fraction of what's actually spawned. A large fecund female bluefin that's, let's say, I don't know, 600 pounds or 700 pounds could probably lay 10, 12, 14, 15 million eggs. And of those, maybe
in
only
their lifespan or
in
a
year,
single spawn?
In a single season. Well, they're
how
what we call serial.
Spawn? Sorry,
multiple.
Continue.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's a great question. They're called serial batch spawners.
Okay.
So they'll spawn here, do their thing, then they move. They find another area, then they'll spawn again, and so they'll do that repeatedly.
How much time frame?
Like, I don't know the actual time.
Roughly?
I don't know if it's days or weeks.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the actual intervals. But it is a seasonal thing. Yep, bluefin will spawn once a year in the sense of the actual cycle, maturation of gonads and so forth. But then within the maturity portion of the cycle, they'll lay eggs at different different.
And you said
points.
Up to 15 million eggs in a single spawning season?
Oh, for one female? Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
With a 99.999%.
Yeah.
Not.
Are all going to die. So the question is, well, why do you keep the larvae? Chances are most of those larvae aren't even going to live anyway.
That is interesting.
They're not even going to live. And what we're sampling is what we're sampling is not even a rounding error in the decimal, right? It's just such a small component. So that's not going to have an impact on it at all.
Okay, so you collect the larva. So it's like, essentially, it's got to be like a sieve net.
Yeah, it's a specialized net.
And then you take, obviously, the DNA from the larva.
Yep, they'll sequence the larva. They'll get their fingerprint. And then what we can do is we can match up sibships. We can match up relatedness. So we can match up fish that have both the same parents, and we can match up larvae that have maybe one of those parents, but then another parent. So you have half sibs.
That's so cool.
So you can identify sibling, the sibships from the two parents and the offspring across, and then you can also identify the fact that you've got, like, let's just say it's a male. This male spawned with so many other different females across that spawning cycle, and you can see that too, because the only the male DNA is matching that offspring. That it has a different female, or vice versa. It's
or
got
vice
that
versa.
same
Exactly.
same female or a different male, and so you can do that. And we have pops. We have lots of pops collected already, and that's what our initial estimates of biomass for close kin in the pilot project came from. It came from the success of being able to match up the larvae and the adults. We have them. It's very cool. We have them already.
That is seriously so cool.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Like I said, I think what we're most excited about is the fact that it works. Like, it works. It's not as though we're in an area where it's an unknown whether this will or will not work. We know we right now we have proof of concept. It works.
Yeah. Well,
and so that's why we're so excited to operationalize it, because we're here. We're here. So just to give you the numbers,
we're here after so long.
Well, I can give you some specific numbers.
Yeah,
so we've got genetic comparisons of 3,321 larvae to 8,278 adults. This is from one of the papers that's underway that we're putting together with Noah and other collaborators. That produced 118 total parent offspring pairs from 56 unique parents.
Wow.
Yeah. So it works. That's the cool thing, is this works. We are primed. We are ready to go. And now we just need everybody to participate and start sending these things in.
That's so cool.
And
to build off the existing database.
Yes. What we've done so far is just a pilot. It's a pilot. But again, why do you do a pilot? Well, you don't want to invest tons and tons of money into something if there's the potential that it might not work out. So what we've done is, ourselves and the rest of the scientists and the federal scientists at NOAA, we've sort of built this project sequentially with all of our different partners, and there has been investment in it. There has been financial investment in it for sure, but it works. There's proof of concept. It's very cool. This is one of these moments, I think, in a science nerd's career, if you will, where you're like, oh, this is really neat.
It's coming together.
Really neat. Yeah, it's actually working.
Yeah,
it's actually working.
I feel like it's got to be really hard to be in your position, because you can get so fixated on specific details, and kind of hard to come up for air and be like, what's the big picture, and getting to be able to put all this together. This is huge, and see the results of it and the potential for it.
And there's so much in addition to this. I mean, we already. So another aspect about this, and again, this is definitely nerdy now because it goes above and beyond just getting a population estimate. We're going to be able to track and determine how successful different individuals are at reproduction. And there's been a lot of evidence to suggest that not all parents are created the same, right? Some are better at it than others are. They produce more eggs.
It makes sense.
Their eggs are better quality, so perhaps that gives the larva a better chance because the yolk sac is larger and it provides a nutritional benefit for a longer period of time. Those adults may, either through random chance or maybe from learned behavior, spawn in areas that are conducive to larval survival. So, for example, when this bluefin larva is spawned, it doesn't have very long to acquire its nutrients from the yolk sac before that's depleted and it has to start eating.
Yeah.
And this is a physiology. This is a basic physiology principle. Those really small animals need a lot of food and very, very quickly per unit gram of their body. And if they don't get it, they're going to die very quickly of starvation. And so the parents have to position those offspring in oceanographic areas that are favorable to them, presumably with either some form of small zooplankton or some sort of crustaceans or something that they need to eat in abundance. And remember, when you're this small, it's really difficult too to move through the water. Physics is not on your side. physics isn't on our side anyway. As people, we're very awkward swimmers. We suck at it. Even our best swimmers stink at it. Oh, no, not compared to a tuna. But even still, when they're really small, physics is against them, right? They've got, you've got two forms of drag on that larva, and it's really hard for them to overcome it. So it's not as though a larva that's only a few millimeters can swim miles and miles to find food. It has to be there. It has to be within this, this sphere of influence of the larva.
Which explains why they spawn in these warm water locations.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So for bluefin, a colleague of mine at NOAA, John Walter, always says it's an interesting life history attribute that you have so much mobility, and you can go to Iceland, or you can go to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, or Newfoundland, or you can go to the Scandinavian countries. But if you want to spawn, you have to come back to warm water. It's one of those crazy requirements. It produces an amazing benefit to them to be able to travel these extensive distances and forage on really lipid-rich food. But then at the end of the day, it's like, I got to go back, to that warm. I got to go back to that other.
Every time I go back to Texas,
exactly.
I go back.
I got to go back to that spot. So
I really like the lobster rolls, but I got to go back.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so funny.
So it's an interesting sort of paradigm that bluefin are caught in. But again, Close Kin is giving us all kinds of really neat information. We'll be able to track the success of spawning individuals through time, potentially for as much as 10 or 15 or more years if they're not caught or they don't die of natural causes. And you'll get mortality estimates out of it. It's I don't know. I'm nerding out a little bit, but it is a game changer. Most of the time in science, this is one of the, I just finished teaching a summer class, and I had a few students in there that did projects, and the first question I asked them, I said, so did everything in your summer go as planned? And they looked at me like, no, it didn't. And I'm like, well, welcome to science, because that's the way it is. A lot of times you fail, but you learn by your failures, and by overcoming those, that's how you get to something like this, right? Yeah. It's a collection of not only our lab. We're a part of this on the sampling end, but this is a huge project. We have geneticists on this, we have mathematicians on this, stock assessment scientists, managers. There's just such a big group of people, and to have it all come together and work for everybody is, in my opinion, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So we're excited. Really amazing. We're really excited. So hopefully get a lot of buy-in, and people are really energized about the project.
That's cool, Walt. Thank you so much. I don't want to take too much more of your time. We've already been chatting for an hour and a half, which blows my mind, because I feel like that I just looked at I was like, holy cow. But
any questions? I'm happy
to
answer
have
any
you
questions.
on here.
That's a problem.
I do want to ask a couple things about bluefin tuna.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Specifically, but you can go into any other species too, because sharks also a big one, I think, with this one. But we've talked about how these fish go all over the ocean, and they have their site fidelity, where they go back and spawn in the same locations. It's so fascinating to me that these fish have a ability to find themselves in where they seem to want to be, especially with site fidelity, where they migrate to different locations throughout the year and feed on different things throughout the year. When they are so migratory, crossing ocean basins, and it's not like there's a GPS or a map, or it's the blue water. There's there's currents, and there's temperature change. But what is your take, your lab's take, the scientific community's take on how these fish are actually able to know where they are and know how to get to where they want to be?
And just stumped me. No. Truth be told, we do not know the mechanisms, at least in totality, that go into this. So you are correct. This is the most. So I teach a lot of classes on fisheries, fish biology, fisheries management, and things like that. And what I tell my students time and time again is, for me, the most fascinating part of animal behavior is long distance migration. Now, Terrestrial animals do it. Birds are some of the most magnificent migrators on the planet. I mean, almost pole to pole.
Crazy.
However, birds cheat. Let me detail that. No, I'm not taking anything away from birds. Birds are spectacular.
Don't tell Chloe.
Yeah, exactly. They're some of my favorite animals. But
kidding.
I'll try to put this into context. When you're on land, you do a lot of outdoor stuff, I know, right? So my family hunts and fishes, and that's kind of how I grew up, was in the woods, and we grew and killed or harvested what we were going to eat, right? Mm-hmm. So on land, you begin to learn and take notice of features and where animals go. And a lot of times animals will go based on some of those features, whether it's food or shelter or water and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. Similarly, if let's say you're a bird, not to pick on birds, but let's say that you're a bird and you're flying. Well, now we know for a fact that birds are even picking up on human cues like roads and things like that in terms of knowing where they are at certain times. But nonetheless, even before that, topography has distinctive features. There are mountains, there are lakes, things like that. So when I say it's cheating, it's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, they're not cheating per se, but
not like we are.
No, not like we are. Yeah, with an iPhone. Take me to, but let's put this in perspective for a fish. So if you're a giant bluefin and you are in the Gulf of Maine, or you're in Southwest Nova Scotia, or you're in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the visibility in that water on a good day is maybe 40 feet. That's a spectacular day, by the way. I mean, I've done a lot of diving in the Northeast for commercial purposes and recreational purposes. And,
that's cool.
If you can see 40 feet, that's amazing to see that far. This animal is cruising generally 2 to 6 knots, burst swimming upwards of 20 or more knots. And as you know, because of the way they've evolved, they can't stop swimming. Right? They're ram ventilators. Mm-hmm. They've lost the opercular buccal pump. They can't suck water in like most fish do. They have to maintain their respiration via swimming through the water and adjusting their gape size. So that fish is always moving forward, and it's always going left and right and up and down and in circles and whatever it's doing. And it knows where it is in what I call a featureless medium. So they're in water, first and foremost, that they can't see in. There's a lot of debate about this. For all intents and purposes, though, we don't believe that they're using currents, because how do you tell a current when you're moving in a moving fluid? It'd be very hard to distinguish those two things. They're at the surface, then they're 6,000 feet down. Then they're 5,000 feet down. Then they're in clear water. Then they're in murky water or turbid water. And so how do they keep track of every movement, of every angle of approach and turn that they're doing, and then find their way back to a particular region, like you mentioned before, like maybe a spawning area? There are countless examples in the electronic tagging literature. We can provide them. Barb can provide them. Molly can provide them. Other researchers in the Eastern Atlantic and so forth can provide them. I'm only highlighting a few people. Of fish that have been tagged in an area. They leave, the tag stays on for a year, the fish comes back to basically the exact same spot that it was a year ago. How in the world does an animal do that in the water when it can only see maybe 20 feet or 30 feet in front of it? It can't see the bottom. It can't see left or right more than, like I said, 20 or 30 feet. There's no reference points in the water. How do you know where you are in a moving body of fluid? There's no signs, there's no markers. But
I have no idea.
Well, that's the thing, and just speaking from our stuff, which is not as big as some of the other tagging archives, but we have bluefin that will leave the Northwest Atlantic, go to Africa, and they come back again. How in the world are they doing that? Or they go from the Gulf of Maine and they hit the Straits of Gibraltar and they're hit it. It's not a very wide gap from speaking from an Atlantic Basin perspective.
For sure.
And yet they're hitting
very
it,
skinny
right?
Through there.
They hit it, exactly.
Lots of ship traffic. Yeah.
Tons. And they're able to do that. And what I will share with your listeners, because this is part of a lot of public outreach and the dissections and stuff that we do, the brain of a giant bluefin, let's just make it a big fish, like an 800-pound fish, is about the size of my thumbnail.
Stop.
Yeah, I can send you pictures if you want. If you want to link them in. Yep.
Yes.
It's about the entirety of the brain is about the size of my thumbnail. And so again, what I always emphasize to my students is, I have this, and I lose my car at the supermarket, and yet this animal has a brain. And then this animal has. Sorry, it's
you
true.
Would totally bite the hook.
Yeah, I would definitely bite the hook. I wouldn't live past age 7 or 8 probably. I'd bite the first one I saw, and then this animal has something like that's that big, and they're able to navigate all around the ocean. There are some suggestions. Other animals we know have magnetite, like marine turtles and stuff. It's not really, we don't think that tunas have them. Tunas appear to have the ability to at least keep track of light cycles. So they have a pineal window. I can share pictures of this too. They have a pineal window,
it's like
which
a
is
soft spot on.
It's a soft spot, but more importantly, it's a non-pigmented region of their head. And when you look at it, when you look down on it, that soft spot that you push on and is quote soft. But if you were to cut it off just under the skin, between the skin and the scalp, the bone rather, the skin and the skull bone, you would notice a clear area in that, and we call that the pineal window.
It's like a triangle.
In bluefin, it's more in bluefin, it's more oval.
Oh, is it different across tunas?
Well, it's different in a bluefin. It's more like an oval when you cut it down deep.
Interesting.
And it's filled with like a clear collagen type substance, and that goes right down to the pineal gland. And the idea behind that, again, this is a theory, but the idea is that the animals can use that as a way to keep track of daytime or day duration. They might use it to reset their circadian clocks potentially. Again, I'm speaking theoretically here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not that it's a tried and true thing, but we think that they might use that as a way also to understand seasonality. So if you're in the Gulf of Maine and it's November, okay? Yes, the days are getting colder, but because water has thermal mass, it doesn't cool as fast as the air does. So in Maine, our warmest month is July in the air. Our warmest month in the water is September. There's a lag, right? There's a latency that takes. And then it occurs the other direction. When the air starts to cool, the ocean takes longer. Mm-hmm. There's not only that, but if you think about temperature in the ocean, it changes this way, right? Horizontally, right? We fish fronts, right? What are the things we look for? We look for frontal boundaries to fish for a lot of these HMS species. But it also changes this way. Mm-hmm. So remember, this animal, the thermocline, depending on how deep or shallow it is. Then once you get deep enough, it's all the same temperature. But you have an animal that's moving rapidly. Most of the ocean is only right around 4 degrees. That's the majority of the water.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, most of the ocean is only one particular temperature. It's only the really upper margins that are,
I mean, it makes sense that the upper margins vary more.
Yeah, they're going to vary more. Yeah.
But I didn't realize or know that most of the ocean is around 4 degrees.
Yeah.
That's a really cool fact. Please continue. Didn't mean to derail.
No pun intended. And so the animal is getting different temperatures going this way and going this way. So temperature is not a good characteristic or variable for it to understand, it's getting later in the season. But where we are in the temperate zones, light is predictable, right? The light curve is predictable with seasons. And so, in June, you have your 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. Once you get past, then it starts to decline. You get more darkness hours than you do light hours. And again,
in the northern hemisphere.
In the northern hemisphere, yeah, it's flipped, and then of course it's not that when you're at the equator. But some people think that the animal is somehow keeping track of that timing. And so if you're looking for a reason to leave an area, temperature may not be the best cue because it changes so much, but light levels might be. And in truth, it's probably an environmental variable and a biochemical signal that basically tells the fish, hey, I've fattened up, I'm ready to go. Hormones and all that stuff comes into play.
But then where am I going to go?
Well, that's the thing. How do they know where to go? I mean, you've just spent 5 months in the Gulf of St. Lawrence going in circles, right? And up
How
and
do you
down and
know
back
which
and
way
forth.
is south?
How do you know how to get, and the other thing is, how the Gulf of St. Lawrence is. So you come up around Cape Breton and then you go down, right? And it's a gulf. So it's semi-enclosed. And if you want to go south, like if you had a true magnetic south bearing that you wanted to go on,
Yeah.
you would just keep hitting land. You'd be running into Antigonish, or wherever it is going south. But they don't. They know enough to go up, out over Cape Breton, and they know enough to go out.
They're
And
so crazy.
Similarly, where we are, they don't just stay in Cape Cod Bay and just bang their head against the against the sand or go through the canal. They'll go out and they find a way. Med is the same thing. We know that a proportion of those bluefin do not stay in the med. Some do, but a large proportion of those probably don't, and they leave. How do they know where to leave? How do they know how to hit the gap at the straits? Like that to me is just amazing. And I mean, maybe there are other people that have this answer, but I have to defer to the classic. I don't know on this one. I just don't know how they do it, but it is pretty spectacular. And they're one of many animals that can do it routinely. The marine mammals can do it. The fishes can do it. The marine reptiles can do it. I mean, sharks can do it. You're aware the turtles go back to their natal hatchling or hatch beaches and things like that. And that's after some of those females, the internesting is 2 or 3 years. You roam the ocean for 2 or 3 years, and then you find the place where you were hatched. It is insane. Truly one of the most amazing aspects of animals. And like I said, I could almost lose my car in the driveway. So
yeah, no, thinking about trying to get back to like the first house I lived in, I and I was there for 8 years.
Yep.
Yeah. So that would be really challenging for me. Wow. Okay, cool, Walt. Well, I really just wanted you to talk on that, and you did, and I appreciate it. That was awesome.
Animal migration is really fascinating. We just don't fully understand the drivers behind it, especially in the marine environment. It is just it's wild. It's wild. I wish I had an answer. I really do.
It's insane. But every step gets us closer to understanding these fish more.
Yep.
Okay. I want to just hear a little bit about the Mid-Atlantic, and then I will cut you loose.
Sure, no problem.
What is with a little fin clip? Just kidding. So, how's it going up there? First off, I know that there's some rough weather. You guys, we are in day 2 of the Mid-Atlantic. It's Tuesday right now. This is going to be released in what month are we? August. This is going to be released in September, just the beginning of September. But where I'll be in the woods elk hunting, but probably miserable and really happy. But funny how those are, 2 of the same sometimes in our
exactly.
world. But the weather looks really rough. Yeah. I want to hear about that, and also I want to know a little bit more about what you're doing up there.
Sure. So it is very rough. We have several things that are going on, not the least of which is Aaron is barreling towards us. And I don't know what category it is, but it's well above a top.
Downgraded from a 4 to a 3. So I was like, that's good.
Yeah.
Yay.
So this is about, I think, as challenging of conditions as you would not want to have.
Yeah.
The boats did go out yesterday. We saw flags flying. White marlins were caught. A few were weighed. Mostly those were weighed down in Ocean City. We had some tunas come in. So the boats braved it. Ollie will give them credit. It's not a day that I probably would have wanted to be out there, but they did it and they had some success. So we do have some fish on the board. We have some leaders. There's plenty of time left, of course, but the middle of the week is going to be very challenging with time. However, the tournament has also provided an extra day on the end. So Saturday is going to be a fishing day as well. And the weather for Saturday looks a little bit better, I think, than it does certainly during the middle of the week when we're bearing the brunt of Aaron. So that's going well. Again, I feel really bad for everybody that organizes the tournament because this is such a huge undertaking. There's so many people involved, and then to have Mother Nature come in and kind of smack you in the face a little bit is frustrating. But everybody's making the best out of it. We do have some boats that are braving the weather, so my applause to them for doing it. I saw some videos of boats out there yesterday. I was like, ooh. It's not often you see a 80-foot. It's not often you see a 74 and 80-foot Viking disappear under the wave of, you know,
I saw a video. I was like, wow, that looks like the Great Barrier Reef. Like that is not, we're not fooling around like that.
No.
That's, and you're like 100 miles offshore. Whereas in Australia, it gets rough. Like I worked sorry, I got a notification because my computer was like, too many hand gestures. Sorry. I am not going to hold back on my hand gestures. I get it anticipated. So animated. So anyway, it gets really rough in Australia as I point over my shoulder. But you can tuck behind the reef if you need to. But seeing that water out there and seeing those boats fishing out there, I was like, holy cow. So
there's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go.
And then in terms of what we do at the tournaments, so there's a couple of different things. We like to take samples of the fish that are here, especially the billfishes. As my colleague John Graves would say, you know, even though we don't have a shortage per se of marlins, they are what we would consider to be a rare event species for us, for the scientific community. What does that mean?
It's rare event for us too.
We're only allowed to keep 250 billfish a year, correct? And so that alone, I mean, we might sample that many giants in a week just to put it into perspective. And so the opportunities that you have to sample those fish are automatically reduced. Think about it. You have billfish tournaments from Texas all the way to New Jersey. Yeah. It's a big area, and you're only allowed 250. And generally speaking, to be honest with you, we don't bring in anywhere near that. We've had a couple years where we've come close, but by and large, a lot of the tournaments have increased their minimum size. They've increased, their minimum length. They've increased their minimum weight. And so a lot of those fish are going back in the water. Yeah. And so the tournaments, and just like, and just like I was describing for the angling category, bluefin boats, how they're spread out, same thing applies for the marlin boats. So it's almost impossible. Like if someone comes into Ocean City next week with a white marlin that they wanted to keep, it's like impossible for us to get a sample from it, like to go down there and look at the stomach or do whatever, because it's just so far away and it's so spread out. Yeah. So similar to the commercial dealers, the tournaments are great opportunities because they funnel, right? All the boats have to come to one of two weigh stations, and we can get all sorts of information from the fish. One of the things that we have been working on is billfish aging. So we have a project where we're looking at quantifying, if you will, or confirming billfish longevity, so how long they live. We do this in cooperation or collaboration with Alan Andrews. He's a specialist in what we call bomb radiocarbon, and so he takes the otoliths. He's on his own now. He has a private business, and I believe now he's in New Caledonia. He was in Hawaii, then he was in Sweden. I think now he's in New Caledonia. Fun. But Alan has this great lab. He works with a lot of different fish, and he uses basically seems kind of out there, but he uses the bomb radiocarbon fallout from atmospheric thermonuclear testing as a means to confirm the periodicity of those rings that I was telling you about in the otoliths. Right. And he's done some great work. And so we have projects with him now for confirming blue marlin longevity and aging, swordfish. We've got some white marlin work going on. Tournaments give us an opportunity to sample particular tissues. I mentioned before that we have epigenetic aging for bluefin. We're trying to do the same thing with billfish. Why? Well, because we're in the same situation. Most of the billfish are released. So right now we have projects that we're spinning up to work with the billfish fleets to do the same thing, to do this fin sampling, if you will.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be so excited. Let me know.
Yep, and that's in the works right now to do the same thing. Again, what can we get from that? We can get the genotype, we can get the relatedness, we can get the aging of the fish. And so we can get those samples from there. A couple of years ago, the Mid-Atlantic, I think it was the Mid-Atlantic Council, I believe, or Atlantic States. Oh gosh, this is terrible that I can't remember. It might have been Atlantic States. I think it was Atlantic States. They wanted to explore a commercial chub mackerel fishery. And it was brought up at one of the meetings that, well, wait a minute, chub mackerel might be an important prey species. We want to know what's eating it and so forth. And so we worked, among other things, with a bunch of the tournaments, the Big Rock, the White Marlin Open, the Mid-Atlantic, and we sampled both the billfishes and the tunas at those tournaments, looking for the presence of chub mackerel. And what we found is it was a relatively minor dietary component. We found only a handful of chub mackerel in only a couple of white marlin. So again, that was another great application or applicable research where we were asked to answer a question We went to the tournaments, which is where we were going to get all of our billfish data. We weren't going to get it from just one here, one there. We had to go to the tournaments. We sampled over 100 billfish across a few years. So we had a very robust sample size. And then we were able to answer the question. So it was it was sort of a great circular moment where we asked the question, we worked with the tournaments, we got the samples, we evaluated them, and then we went back to the council and we were able to, or Atlantic States, and we were able to tell them, yep, nope, there doesn't seem to be a high presence of chub mackerel, at least in the billfish that we sampled. Granted, that can change. But so there's all kinds of that work there. And then we have some colleagues here from VIMS who are also doing some genetic work with billfishes and continuing the stomach content work here as well. So
we had Quinn from VIMS.
Yeah, that's Jen McDowell's student. Yep.
Yeah, so she's awesome. She was when I was working at the White Marlin Open last week, 2 weeks ago, which is crazy. She was there collecting samples on the stomachs, and we found in like a 64-pound spearfish, we found a bill that was about this long. Which was so cool. She was like, Katie, do you think this is a billfish bill? And I'm like, that is definitely a billfish bill, like no doubt about it. And she pieced it together, and it was just so cool to see that. So when you were talking about, mortality of the baby fish, I'm like, man, for a while, it is hard to get big in the ocean.
Yep, it absolutely is.
That is so cool. Yeah, I love that. I love working with Quinn. And then we got, hopefully, you got your hands, or your colleagues got their hands on that 929.5-pound blue marlin head.
Yeah. So I have a grad student over in Ocean City right now, and Brian's gonna help get it into the cooler for him and into his car. And we're gonna take that back. Yeah. So those fish are really valuable. Again, just like with the big bluefins, you don't see a whole lot of them over 1,000 pounds, right? Or right around 1,000 pounds. And because there's just fewer of them, they don't live as long. That's just the way life is. And so when we have the opportunity to sample them, we try to, because again, the project that we're working on with Alan, these really big marlin heads have been instrumental for us looking at the upper end of longevity for blue marlins and sort of what age they can attain.
So cool. I can't wait to get that information.
Yeah, we know they live over 20 years. Which is really neat.
It's insane. So, that is really neat. It is really neat.
And all those big ones are females too. All the big billfishes, as you know, are females.
All them big girls. I know. I love watching a big girl move the water.
The males are just smaller.
Yeah, they do their thing.
But it's great. So again, our thanks to all the tournament organizers, in particular here at the Mid-Atlantic. Rick Weber, who heads this up, is fantastic and is always very supportive of the science. So
I love it.
My thanks to everybody.
So cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for all your time.
No
I look forward to seeing you next week in Nantucket for the Skilly Project. You're going to be there, right?
I will. Yep.
Okay, you guys.
You're leaving here Saturday. There Monday.
I know. It's exhausting. And so you guys learn more about that. I've got content coming out on the Skilly Project too. It's going to be really exciting. We'll definitely have Walt speaking on some of that content as well. So you don't know that yet, but it's chill. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay. Not a problem.
Well, hey, awesome. Thank you so much for sitting with us. And do you have any last words for our listeners, or anyone that, anything that you feel like you might want to touch on or haven't mentioned, or ways people can get involved with the ocean or your studies or the lab or anything like that?
I guess I would just say to everybody who's helped contribute so far, a very big thank you. And to all of those who think they might be interested, if you have any questions or comments or things that you're curious about, feel free to email me. I can give you my information. And we have a very active social media platform. I don't, because I don't know how to do it, but I have people that know how to do it. I did it once and they said, no, well, please just never touch the social media page again. And so we can be reached via that platform as well. We have a lot of people that message us with certain questions, but by all means, we love to reach out to people. We love to share our data and what our results are. So just a big thanks to the fishing community. It's been a really good collaboration, and everything. I mean, I'll be honest, everything from the Close Kin project would not be possible. We would not be where we are right now if the industry didn't step up and provide us the samples that they did. So my
cool.
big thanks
and
to everybody.
And we're just getting started.
Just getting started.
Right,
this
you guys?
Early days.
Yes.
Yeah, early days.
Perfect. Well, okay. I will insert that information in the description below as well, the contact information, the social media handles. So y'all check that out, explore, get involved, help us make a difference for the future of our fisheries and the fish and all the communities that depend on them. We're so excited about this. I'm sure you can tell how excited we are about this. Y'all don't stop chasing your wild, and we'll be seeing you out there. Thank you so much, Walt.
Thank you very much. Have an awesome day.
You too.
See ya.